Okay, how's everybody doing this evening? My name is Kent. I am in San Diego, California. It is January 10th, or actually January 10th. I always get the date wrong. I don't know why. January 12th, and we're in the evening. We're in the PM. It's actually 5:41 p.m. And I am live. I do have the comment section open. If you'd like to participate, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions or to entertain any comments people have, or to just simply hear what somebody else has to say besides myself. But anyway, I'm going to go through something here very quickly. I'm going to go to a YouTube from CNBC with Chairman Gensler, who is the Securities and Exchange Commissioner who just approved the ETFs for Bitcoin. And if you've been following Bitcoin, you see what happened. It ran up to almost 50,000. I think now we're down to around 42, 43,000. We're going to talk about that. So I want to go through this really quickly because he has some pretty interesting things to say. And I listen to these people very closely because they'll tell you what's going on in kind of a offhanded way. They don't tell you precisely what's going on. You have to kind of figure it out for yourself. But by and large, they're telling you what's happening before it happens. And the reason they do that is because that's just part of their modus operandi. They got to be honest with you, but yet dishonest with you. They got to tell you what's happening, but at the same time mislead you. And if you start to understand that, you will start to figure out how this whole thing works. And I'll just give you a quick example. When I went to school many years ago, because I'm pretty old right now, I was a horrible test taker. Absolutely horrible. Could never do well on the standardized tests. Always was embarrassed of my scores. I'd get to the end of the year, they'd test our class, and I was always way at the bottom of the class as far as my score, as far as my whatever scholastic test they were giving us. And I could never figure it out because I knew my friends were doing better than I was, but I could never equal them on scores and tests. And I never could understand that. So I always went through school, always doing very poorly on standardized tests. And over the years, I started to realize my mistake. It wasn't that I was dumb or I was, less than average as far as intelligence was concerned. It was that I didn't know how to take a test. And what I mean by that is I always took a test with my own thinking, my own conclusions. Whatever I thought was correct was the correct answer. And I started to realize tests aren't about what you think. It's about what they want you to think. So once you understand in a standardized test what the objective is, as far as what they want you to believe or think, and they want you to give that back on a test, you will understand how the test works, and you'll start to be able to answer the questions correctly. And the best way I can give an example of this is a few years back, I was one of my sons during his birthday wanted to go down to the shooting range. And of course, you did the shooting range, and you had to do a safety course before you did a shooting range. So I had to take a test in order to be able to shoot the handguns in the shooting range. And I said, oh my gosh, you got to take this stupid handgun test. I don't want to take it. I haven't studied it. I don't know what what it is about and everything like that. So I went ahead and I told the guy, I said, I don't want to take this test because I don't think I'm going to pass it. He goes, look, just wait a minute. You'll pass it. He goes, just put in your mind that you're in California and they hate guns. And if you have that in your mind, every time you answer one of the questions, you will answer the question correctly. And he was absolutely correct. I think they had 30 questions. I got 29 of them right. So all I did is I just took the test from the perspective, I'm in California and they hate guns. Because I'm in California and they hate guns, just make sure every time you answer a test question in this exam, you use that perspective. And that's what I did, and I did very well. So since that time, I've always done really well on standardized tests. In fact, I can ace almost every one of them because I know from where the test is coming from. Well, that's the way these guys are. You got to know from where they're coming from and what their agenda is and what their objective is. And then you will understand what's going on with Bitcoin and where it's going to and where it's leading to. So I'm going to share my screen with you. See if I can pull the screen up. Okay, there we go. So here we go. This is Gensler. Well, first of all, let's talk about the market, because I think some people may be panicking about Bitcoin being at 42,000. Actually, let's refresh it. 42,700. So it looks like if you look at the last 24 hours, it doesn't look so great because we were almost at 50,000, which is what I called as the top here. We were at 49, almost 50,000. I would think it was just a few $100s from 50,000. and now we're back to bouncing around 42 or 43,000, which really isn't horrible considered the 90-day look at this thing, because this is 90 days. In 90 days, we were down around 25, 26,000, and now we were almost hit 50. So if you bought this 90 days ago, which is 3 months, at the peak here, you were almost at the top of the chart at 50,000. That's a double. So in 3 months' time, you almost doubled your money. And look at how the progression of the chart's gone. It just continues to climb. We're in a dip right now, but the reason we're in a dip is because ETF was approved. You're going to have people sell on that news because a lot of people were holding for that news, or maybe people were over leveraged for that news. And now the news has happened, they're going to be a little bit of a fall off. So I wouldn't be too concerned about this price. I think this price is right in line with where we should be. And I think right now it's probably going to go much higher, simply because you have a lot of retail market buying Bitcoin ETFs right now. And there's going to be a time where they're going to run out of inventory. Coinbase will run out of inventory. Everybody run out of inventory. And then they're going to have to start buying up more Bitcoin to keep up with the demand, the market. So let's listen to what Gensler has to say. Actually, I want to listen to this part first. You know, he goes, first of all, he talks about why he approved the ETF. And I made a video on this, and I you know, not to be someone that says they always got it right, because I don't, but I did get it right. I got it absolutely right. The reason they and I'll show you the video. The reason they did this is because of that DC court case. The U.S. Court of Appeals said, hey, look, there's no reason why you can't have this ETF. ARK sued, said you got to have the ETF. And so Gensler wasn't going to go against the U.S. Court of Appeals, DC Court of Appeals, second highest court in the country. And he didn't appeal. And since he didn't appeal, they weren't going to appeal to the Supreme Court. So they went ahead and approved the ETF. So if you go back and you watch this video right here, why the ETF, Bitcoin ETF is a guarantee. That's exactly what I said in that video, that it was because of the court case. And it will. And this was way before. This video was made on January 4th. The decision didn't come till January 12th. So, or January, what was it? January was the other day, January 10th. So this decision, but this video was made 6 days before the ETF was ruled on. And I told you exactly why it was going to get ruled on. It was going to get ruled on because the DC Court of Appeal said it. You can't. There's no reason not to have it. So that's the reason why he approved it. And I think he did it kind of in a really kind of weird way. But I want to talk about where Bitcoin's going and what the real thing going on with Bitcoin is, because he tells you in this video where we're going with Bitcoin and what's really going on with Bitcoin. So here we go. I'm going to have Gensler talk a little bit, and I'm going to let it run. If they demonetize me, I don't care. I got one person watching. I probably get very few views on this video. So let's just let it play. If they don't like it, they don't like it. So here, let's listen to Gensler.
Which is it?
Look, no doubt there are innovations within this field, and those innovations, which I taught about at MIT, around a ledger system. It's just an accounting system called.
Okay, so he said they went ahead and did the Bitcoin and it's accounting and ledger system, but he wants to talk a little more, and this is where this is going. And I've been talking about this for a long time.
The blockchain technology. But there's an irony in the midst of this. Satoshi Nakamoto said this was going to be a decentralized system. And finance, this has led to centralization. Think about the irony of those who say this week is historic. This was about centralization and traditional means of finance, that investors who could already express themselves in Bitcoin, you could already, before this week, buy it through major brokerage houses, but now you can buy it through this thing called an exchange-traded.
Okay, so what he's saying is that Bitcoin's already been available to the investing public. We didn't need to do the ETF. And what we did through the ETF is just centralize Bitcoin when Bitcoin was originally supposed to be decentralized. So he's making that point right now. So and let me continue on with this, because you can watch his lectures at MIT, because he did talk quite a bit about the Bitcoin, about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology. And he's going to talk about blockchain technology right now, which is why I want you to hear this.
Product,
but the underlying asset still has
centralized.
The underlying asset still has the decentralized, distributed ledger, all those characters. That sounds like a I don't know. That sounds
No,
like
no, no, Andrew, with all respect, there's a lot of centralization here. And even the underlying ledger is largely the Bitcoin's produced by a handful of mining companies and the like. And so I'm just saying, now in terms of monetary history, we have a dollar, we have a yen, we have a euro, we have the renminbi, and there's a reason for it because we do have a common economy that relies on those.
Okay, so he's talking about, he keeps going, but I just stopped him for a second because I wanted you to kind of understand what he's saying. What he's basically saying here is that here, let me let it keep going because he makes a point here. I think this is a place. I hope it is.
Those currencies.
Chair Gensler, let me ask you this, though. Is there a possibility, despite the fact that this has been now approved, that this spot ETF has been approved, that you could see a day where Bitcoin itself in some way would be outlawed? I ask because if you recall, and now there's a lawsuit taking place between Coinbase and the SEC. They went public, and they've now made, you've come back and said there are certain unregistered securities.
Yeah, the problem with Coinbase is they do have some securities on there, not Bitcoin, because he said in his lectures Bitcoin is not a security. So some of them he would say were securities and they're not registered, and that's the problem they have with Coinbase.
And the like that are on their platform, they say, well, if you approved us the first time, how can you come back and say that this is not kosher? And so I think there is this other question about, and I know you're not endorsing Bitcoin, does that still open up the possibility that Bitcoin could somehow come under fire from the SEC or some other agency?
Look, let me talk about this field more broadly, and the American public is aware of this. It's rife with conflicts. It's rife with fraud and abuse. Without prejudging any one token, many of these tokens, I would suggest a majority of these tokens are actually securities under the securities law. And so the platforms, the various places that you might buy or sell these crypto security tokens need to come into compliance with the federal laws.
What did you make of what Elizabeth Warren, who was very supportive of you taking this role?
Okay, so he's talking about, I think this is very interesting because he's going to talk about why he allowed Bitcoin to become traded in ETF for two reasons. One of the reasons why he was forced to by the U.S. Court of Appeals, the D.C. Court of Appeals, which is the second highest court in the land. He would have had to appeal to the Supreme Court in order to reverse it, and they didn't appeal. As soon as I knew that, and that's what I put in that video, I knew the ETF was going to be done, even though a lot of people said no, could possibly be rejected by him. He was going to make sure, even if they had votes against. I know they had two votes where they have, I think one voted for, one voted against, and then he was a tiebreaker and he had to vote for. This is a democratically led group. He's appointed by Biden. So, and you got Elizabeth Warren and you got all these people that didn't like Bitcoin. So they were kind of negative on, you got Jamie Dimon and all these bankers. So he wanted to stay in line with those people. So that's why he talked a big game against it. And that's why he eventually said he didn't like it. He doesn't like anything like that, but he had to, because you're a government agency and now you're not going to, abide by what the court tells you to do. You're not Donald Trump. Donald Trump's the only guy that says the court tells him to do something and he does exactly the opposite because he doesn't respect the courts. These guys have to respect the courts because that's part of our system. So they had to allow the ETF to go through. It was inevitable. It was going to happen. No way around it. Once they won that case, Ark and Kathy Wood won that case, they were going to have to do the ETF. And I knew that 3 months ago, whenever that case was in October, I think, when they got the decision. The gig was up with them. Here we go.
Originally coming out and saying the SEC is wrong on the law and wrong on the policy.
I have deep respect for those who may have been on the other side of this. But again, I have a deep respect for the law and how courts interpret the law. We had the D.C. Circuit, a three-judge panel rule on this. We looked at it, and I thought this was the most sustainable path forward.
How do you think about other cryptocurrencies? People are now talking about whether there should be an Ethereum ETF and the like. Is that something you think you would take on proactively? Is that something that ultimately, in the same way that Grayscale had to go to court, does the court decision around Bitcoin to you act as a precedent on other currencies?
I look at what we did this week as it's cabined to one non-security commodity called Bitcoin, like we've had gold.
Yeah, so he's basically he's basically telling you, look, we're doing this because we had to because of the DC court, but also we're just looking at this compartmentalizing one non-security, which is Bitcoin.
Spot exchange-traded products and silver exchange-traded products in the past and approved in the past. This is cabined just to that one non-security commodity token.
Okay, let me see what happens here. I ran out of time. I might have missed what I was going to talk to you about here.
Ransomware and the like. And I know that you've asked other people over the last few days, is it being used as a store of value? It's a speculative, volatile store of value. Is it being used as a payment?
I think this is where he talks about what it's used for. That's why the reason for the title is it the evil Bitcoin that's only used for drugs and nefarious activities. And anybody that makes that listens to that argument and even gives it the least bit of significance or even the least bit of weight, it's completely illogical. It doesn't make any sense because the US dollar is by far used for more bad activities than Bitcoin will ever be used for. And everything else included, I mean, gold, silver, anything could be used for bad activities. Saying that Bitcoin is only used for bad activities, drug dealing, money laundering, terrorist activities, that's crazy because Bitcoin's the most transparent thing in the world. It's all on the Bitcoin, every transaction is publicly on the blockchain, and if you want to use IP addresses and the kind of technology they have, you could literally find out who every person is that makes a transaction on the blockchain. So it's probably the biggest way to keep people from using money or using Bitcoin to buy stuff that's not legal. This is probably the easiest way to find it, to control it, is through the blockchain.
Anywhere? Are we buying cups of coffee with it? Not really. The only payment.
Yeah, we're not buying. That's the one thing I'd say. This is where we're going in the future with Bitcoin. We will be using it as a payment form. So in the future, if you go to the grocery store, buy a cup of coffee, you will be able to pay for it with Bitcoin. We're heading that direction. And the ETFs are a good signal that we're going that way with it.
Mechanism it's being used for in sort of in a primary sense is illicit activity. So I think you've been spot on about that, Andrew.
So just on that note, Mr. Chairman, this is out, and I'm not going to take either side on the whole thing, and it's kind of funny. But these are, I don't know the exact units, but if you look since 2017, what's been used.
Okay, well, listen, this guy makes the most illogical argument I've ever heard in my life. I can't even imagine how you can even be a host on CNBC. Can't even imagine how he gets an audience. Listen to what he gets ready to say. It makes absolutely no sense.
To launder money, 20,000 is the unit for a dollar. 33 is the unit for Bitcoin. So that's a multiple of I don't know how much for dollars being used for money laundering versus Bitcoin. But now I could see Bitcoin.
I have no idea what he just said. Like 20,000 and 33,000. He's trying to say $20,000 is the unit they buy drugs with, and 33,000 is the price of a Bitcoin. How does that relate to people using it for nefarious activities? I completely don't understand that. I think the guy is out of his mind.
Bitcoin bear saying, really? Well, it's not even good for money laundering. Then it has zero value. I could just see that as another arrow in the quiver for the bear case. But the question I wanted to ask you was this: let's take the continuum. Let's take the rat poison.
Yeah, rat poison being what Buffett says about Bitcoin.
Beanie Baby, Jamie Dimon, Charlie Munger versus we had yesterday on our Coinbase CEO. Did you hear him make the case for Bitcoin? I mean, it was almost like a symphony to Bitcoin bulls, Chair Gensler. The proof of work, akin to gold. Every monetary aspect we've had for thousands of years is represented perfectly. And Tom Lee, there's never been a mistake on the blockchain out of trillions.
That's true. So if you wanted to watch every transaction, there's never been a mistake on it. It can't be a mistake because you have this ledger that is literally being kept by all the miners. And there can't be any kind of, there can't be something that does not fit in with the ledger. If it does, it won't, it's, that would be a fork. It wouldn't work. It doesn't happen. So everything is within the ledger and it has to be consistent and it has to work or it's not the ledger or it will be. That's what the whole thing about keeping the ledger and all the different miners is. It's about keeping everything in order and keeping everything perfect and every block being validated. That's what the blockchain is. You can't destroy it. You can't mess with it, and you can't make it. Every single one has been perfect, according to what Coinbase. That Armstrong guy said, that CEO of Coinbase.
Of transactions, you understand it. You taught at MIT. Which is it? Is it a beanie baby in your view, or is it something that has inherent value that's going to be part of the finance?
Okay, this whole video has been going on for about 24, 23 minutes. Let me see. 21 minutes. And this is the very pivotal point of this video, is for you to hear what he's about ready to say right now, because this is where we're going with Bitcoin.
Financial system decades from now. Which is it?
Look, no doubt there are innovations within this field, and those innovations, which I taught about at MIT, around a ledger system. It's just an accounting system called the blockchain technology. But there's an irony. In the midst of this, Satoshi Nakamoto said this was going to be a decentralized system. And finance, this has led to centralization. Think about the irony of those who say this week is historic. This was about centralization and traditional means of finance that investors who could already express themselves in Bitcoin, you could already, before this week, buy it through major brokerage houses, but now you can buy it through this thing called an exchange-traded product
but the underlying
as well,
asset still has
centralized.
The underlying asset still has the decentralized, distributed ledger, all those characters. That sounds like a... I don't know. That sounds like
no, Andrew. With all respect, there's a lot of centralization here.
Okay, he talks about that, but there's some place in here, I can't find it exactly, where he talks about this being the future, being the blockchain. And what he's talking about is he's talking about the central bank digital currency. This is a pre-runner to the central bank digital currency. Let me see if I can find it.
Clayton, we had disapproved a number of these over the years.
Yeah, Jay Clayton also disapproved a bunch of these, and I made a video about that. When Jay Clayton said, hey, there was nothing else yet to be done, I knew there were two reasons why this was going to get done. Number one was that it was going to get done because of the court case. It was going to get done because Jay Clayton said it was going to get done. So I knew both of them. Clayton was the one that, Jay Clayton before him, Securities and Exchange Commissioner, they denied a bunch of these. So, and then this guy comes along and appointed by Biden, and now they approved it. He had to. He could not, because the technology is that they want to use the blockchain for a central bank digital currency. That's why they approved it.
And something had changed. I'm a deep believer in the rule of law and a respect for the courts, and taking a new court decision into consideration, we move forward. I think this is the most sustainable path forward.
So it appears, though, from what you're saying and reading through the decision as well, that what changed is not necessarily something inherent to crypto or Bitcoin per se, but what changed was what the courts did. Is that the way to think about this?
Well, again, we do everything here at the Securities and Exchange Commission within the law and within how the courts interpret those laws. And that's what the American people expect, and that's what we do here.
What is your message to investors about Bitcoin now? Because we're going to have all sorts of public investors now potentially.
Yeah, they're supposed to take care of the public, but at the same time, they're getting hacked before the release of the decision. So they can't even take care of their own social media, let alone keeping an eye on the public and make sure everything, and then let alone make sure all this Bitcoin activity isn't being used for illicit drug activity or what. I mean, it's hard to really follow this logic. Really, it is.
We have access to Bitcoin in a way that they didn't before. We were just talking to Larry Fink. He said that he got a huge wave of new investors getting into Bitcoin through this ETF. You have still suggested to be cautious about it, and I'm trying to understand how you think about those cross currents in terms of the message you're telling investors.
Well, look, Bitcoin itself, we did not approve, we do not endorse. This is a product called an exchange-traded product, a way that investors can invest in that underlying non-security commodity called Bitcoin. But yes, investors, I think, should be aware that the underlying asset is a highly speculative, volatile asset, and amongst its use cases is really for illicit activity, money laundering and sanctions and ransomware.
Unbelievable.
And the like. And I know that you've asked other people over the last few days, is it being used as a store of value? It's a speculative, volatile store of value. Is it being used as a payment anywhere? Are we buying cups of coffee with it?
Okay, keeps on rambling on here. I'm not going to be able to find that place where maybe it's right in the very beginning where he talks about it.
The SEC Chair, Gary Gensler. Chair Gensler, we appreciate you being with us. Let me start by asking you this. Do you consider the decision historic? And
that's not it. Anyway, I'm not going to be able to find it, but there's some place in this video, I'll make a link to it here, where he literally talks about how this blockchain technology is really what we're after. And what the blockchain technology does is it allows us, and the way he says this is it allows us to put things on the blockchain and keep track of it so that we can literally have something akin to the digital currency, which is the CB, the central bank digital currency, which is where they're going with this. That's what this is all about. This is the forerunner to the central bank digital currency. We're going to have a central bank digital currency probably within a year. The ETF is probably going to run Bitcoin up very high. I don't know. I'm looking probably at 100,000 before, probably right around the ETF, right around the halving. So that's where we're going. We're going to $100,000 and an ETF or a central bank digital currency. That's the future of Bitcoin. And in the meantime, I think everything's working out just about the way we expected it to work out. And hopefully things will get, the Bitcoin price will start to reflect what's really happened here, which is a lot of money is going to be coming into Bitcoin very soon. And, as long as we, and there's a lot of things, a lot of miners probably selling. Some of the people that held Bitcoin prior to this time, that wanted to take some of the profits off the table when this big decision came through. That's all understandable. And that's about why we took a little bit of a nosedive here recently, or just a little bit of a dip. I wouldn't say nosedive because a couple of days ago it was at this price. So anyway, I'm going to sign off. If anybody has anything to say, let me know. If not, I appreciate the two people that are watching me right now. And hopefully I can continue making these about Bitcoin, because I do think that it's going to be a really interesting future. And I think that the Bitcoin ETF and the Bitcoin, owning the Bitcoin itself, is going to be a very, very easy way to keep ahead of the inflation and keep ahead of all these problems that are plaguing us in our economy, which is how do you continue to keep the economy going in an inflationary way? Can't go. Thank you. Thanks for the thumbs up. How do you keep the economy going in an inflationary way, not letting it go deflationary, keeping the interest rates high, keeping the job market so people have plenty of work so they can continue to make payments on things, and keep this thing all going up in the direction they need it to go, and then do this all during an election year. And this is not going to be easy to do. And if you want to just not think about all this stuff at play, you're going to have to do something like Bitcoin, or maybe do something else. I'm not sure what, but I think Bitcoin's right now is an easy play for the next year. And that's why I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it until we find out who's going to be president, until we find out how they're going to do, what they're going to do with interest rates, and until we find out what's going to happen with all this XX, especially in the United States, what we're going to do with these two proxy wars we've got going on, one in Ukraine, one in the Gaza Strip, not the Gaza Strip, in Israel. When we figure out what's going on with all that stuff, then we'll start to understand the direction this is going to take. I appreciate you watching. Thank you.